I'm Vrinda Gupta, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast.
When my father died in the early 1980s, it was no surprise that my mother was in the dark about our finances. Although she was on the cusp of receiving her MBA after returning to school, she had otherwise been a prototypical housewife. Not only did she have to deal with the trauma of my father's unexpected passing, but also learn quickly how to manage our money. It was the 1980s, after all. Back then, it was mostly accepted that money management and family finance were a man's job and responsibility. Boy, have things changed since then. Or have they? My guest today says that women are not only fighting the gender pay gap, but rethinking a world designed for the default male. She developed a credit card to help pay back the absurd cost of womanhood, a pink tax estimated to be as high as $1,350 per year. Now, I know that many of you listening today and to financial podcasts in general are men and think that this doesn't relate to you. But I also know that you have wives, daughters, girlfriends, and in my case, a mother who silently fights this battle every day. Vrinda Gupta is the co-founder and CEO at Sequin, a first-of-its-kind debit card that builds credit for women. Her women-led team of Visa and PayPal experts just announced a $5.7 million seed financing round via Forbes. Vrinda, welcome to Earn and Invest. I want to start at the beginning of your story. Tell us what happened when you applied for a Chase Sapphire Reserve card after having worked for Visa for years.
Thanks for having me, Doc. Yeah, so I had spent my early career, my first job at Visa, building popular credit cards alongside my team. And, we built a really popular one called the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And I applied for the card because I was very excited to kind of have a card under my own name and start building credit under my own name. And I applied and got rejected while I was at work. And it was this moment where for the first time, I really started thinking about credit or my lack thereof. I had been using a debit card for most of my purchases, and I had been using my dad's credit card as an authorized user, neither of which were building my own credit. And so when I went to apply, even though I had a high income from working at Visa, the credit decisioners don't take income into account. So I lacked credit history. And immediately, I realized something was wrong. I looked at Visa data and I saw that 70% of women were putting their spend on non-credit building tools like me, on debit cards and in cards in other people's names. And given women have this incredible spending power, by the end of this decade, we're actually slated to own 75% of discretionary spend. There felt like there was a mismatch on who was actually controlling the spend and who was getting access to credit. And to me, access to credit is very directly related to access to opportunity. And it felt like there was this gap of where women were going in society and kind of our access to opportunity. So ultimately, that insight and this inequity is what led me to quit my job at Visa and start what is now Sequin.
I want to talk in a moment about that mismatch. But before we do, your credit card trauma appears to be generational. You grew up a first-generation immigrant in the United States. Talk about your mom's fear of credit cards as an immigrant and as a woman and how that translated into some of your feelings about it.
Absolutely. So my family and I are first-generation immigrants from India. And growing up, I watched my mom really have only one fear. To me, my mom is a superhuman. And the one time I saw her kind of rely on my dad because of fear was in the realm of finances, and especially as it related to credit. And that was primarily because my mom felt there were a lot of gotchas in the credit system that, you could get into uncontrollable debt and that could ruin your life. You could make one mistake and it's really hard to come back from it. And so growing up watching her, I realized that I wanted to make sure that I didn't have that same fear. So I could kind of learn for both of us and I could empower myself. I could empower my mom, empower the women around me. And so when I took that job at Visa, it was a lot more than just a job. It was a way to level the playing field generationally and hoping, my future daughter would be sitting in my desk and having a very different experience. And that wasn't the case after I got rejected. So it became this kind of bigger piece where finances to me was always a way to kind of equalize power. And, not having that, watching my mom go through that, myself go through that, and realizing that so many other women were having negative credit experiences just made me feel like if someone didn't do something about this, then, it wasn't going to get better.
So even as a kid, you noticed this power differential. I assume that had a major impact on you choosing financial services when it came to an occupation.
Yep, absolutely. It was just something that was always top of mind and was always important. So I felt really fortunate to be able to get a job at Visa, really understand the industry best practices. And I think that made it all the more shocking that I understood how these products are being built because I was building them. And I still, was the recipient of a lot of these societal and generational biases in the system.
So at that time in which you got turned down for the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, you went and did some research. You mentioned that 70% number, which was part of that research. 70% of women were using debit cards. What other information and data did you find about how women were using money and credit?
Gosh, where do I start? How much time do you have? I think the core of the challenge is that the financial services industry was never designed with women in mind. And the most shocking stat that I learned was women could actually be denied a credit card without a male cosigner until 1974, which really isn't that long ago in the scheme of history. And I also learned that until 1988, we could be denied from business loans. And that is almost my lifetime. And so as we look at the downstream impacts of what it means for products and services not to be designed around a certain population is, of course, we're not going to feel as comfortable interacting with those products because if you don't know how they work, if you don't know how to play the rules of the game, you don't want to play. And so really specifically, some of the stats that I saw were little girls and little boys having an inequity in information around credit by the time they reach high school. So this starts very young. Women were significantly less likely to have a lesson in credit. We all know that we're not really taught about finances in school. So there's not a place in which we're really catching up. So there's this kind of information gap that starts young. The second piece is the industry overall. What I saw was banks were spending 13 times advertising to men than they were to women. And so even if we were interested, even if we had the information, we weren't aware of the products because those products weren't really where we were. The other pieces that I saw was the way that these credit cards are being built today and the reward schemes are centering where men are spending traditionally versus where women are spending traditionally. And that was a huge shift in society that legacy players aren't really keeping up with. So when you see these traditional credit cards, you see a lot of rewards cards, right? And it's these travel rewards where you have airline lounge access and you have all these travel perks. And of course, I like to travel as much as the next person. But the difference is that the categories in which women are spending are fundamentally different than just that travel category. So you see us controlling, as I mentioned, that 75% of discretionary spend. And that includes household spend, that includes retail, it includes beauty, it includes medical services. There are all of these costs of being a woman that aren't really being rewarded in these products. And so in addition to our spend not really being rewarded, I felt the way that fundamentally we as women are spending is not being rewarded. And these card products, yes, are aspirational if you are this business traveler. But if you have other aspirations, really anything else, you want to learn how to code, you want to better your mental health, there's not really those sort of perks on your traditional products. So I felt there was a huge opportunity to build a product that really stood for all the aspirations that we have as women have, which is, everything to take over the world. So there wasn't really a product that stood for the power that is women and women's spending power as well.
As you spoke of rewards, I thought a lot about that pink tax that I mentioned in the introduction. A lot of people don't know what a pink tax is or don't understand the concept. Explain it for us.
So the pink tax is an absurd tax on everyday products and services that affect women. And essentially, women are paying more for everyday products and services 42% of the time. The classic example that's become kind of emblematic of the problem is razors. So there's a men's razor, there's a women's razor. The woman's one is pink, and all of a sudden it's 42% more expensive for the exact same product. As we think about the pink tax at Sequin, and kind of our thesis is, yes, for everyday products and services, they are more expensive for women. But there's a whole slew of hidden costs to being a woman that we're kind of lumping into the pink tax category as well. So a few of those are, women being more likely to be caretakers, and we're taking a step back from our careers many times to be caretakers. So what does that mean in terms of when we go back and for our earning? The gender wage gap is still very real. Looking at even mortgages, we're seeing that women are more likely to pay a mortgage back on time, but we are actually getting higher interest rates. And then, we're outliving our husbands as well. So we have these different capital requirements. And that's small things like, not small in terms of finances. They're big in terms of finances, but every day I'm not necessarily at night going to be taking public transit because I don't feel safe. And so I'm spending a lot more on ride sharing than my male counterparts are. Of course, the medical services as well for women are so much more. So anyway, I could go on, but the pink tax, I think, just kind of is one of the culprits of all these hidden costs to being a woman. So not only are we not coming into the financial services system on a level playing field, we also have all of these other hidden costs that we have to kind of factor for as well. And so, we're hoping with our products that we can kind of lessen the impact of some of those, not saying we're going to be able to solve the problem overnight, but, having awareness and being able to pay back some of the costs of the hidden costs of being a woman is what we're hoping to do with our product.
We're going to talk specifically about Sequin in a moment, but before we do, let's talk about the credit score. Is the importance of the credit score overlooked for women? And are there some unfair advantages to being a man when it comes to credit score?
One of our key insights at Sequin, and one of the problems with credit scoring today, is it reflects systemic biases against women in the scores themselves. So to make an important distinction, it's not that these card issuers are looking at women and saying, if woman, no, right? Because that became illegal in 1974. But the challenge is that the factors that go into credit scoring are, again, reflecting these challenges that women have. And so really specifically, one of the factors, a key factor in your credit score is credit utilization, which is 35% of your credit score. And really simply put, your credit utilization is the percentage of your overall credit line that you're using. So, your credit line is $100, you're using 10% is your credit utilization. What's happening with women is because we're getting lower credit lines on average, even if we're using the same amount of our credit, if our credit utilization, the raw dollar amount is the same, our credit utilization ends up being artificially inflated and making our risk look higher than it is. And this credit utilization factor is disproportionately affecting women because if you keep your credit utilization below 35%, that'll keep you kind of out of the red zone. But for excellent credit, you want to stay below 10% every day of the month because you don't know when your issuer is going to be reporting your credit usage or your credit utilization to credit bureaus. And so this is something that is affecting women. And we did some studies at Sequin where we had women dramatically reduce their credit utilization every day, and their scores went up 20 points on average in a week. And for one woman, it went up 118 points. And so this is a factor and an example of how reporting itself is reflecting, the fact that women are getting lower credit lines, even though, we statistically are better to lend to.
And for those who don't understand, why is a higher credit rating important?
The way I like to explain credit scores is it's the only grade that matters after you graduate. You need a credit for all of your life's goals, whether it is getting an apartment. Many employers look at your credit. Of course, bigger life purchases like getting a car, getting a home. Most of your life goals are very closely tied to financial goals. And many times that is getting access to a loan, and credit, can cost good credit can save you a lot of money over your life, and bad credit can cost you a lot over your lifetime.
Yeah, most people forget that your employers actually could look at your credit rating, decide whether to hire you or not, which I think surprises people. So let's jump into Sequin. First and foremost, where did you come up with the name?
I love this question. So I founded Sequin when I was doing my MBA summer internship at a design agency called IDEO. And one of my very close colleagues is a very creative person. And before Sequin had a name, I said to him, I want to create, a company, a mission that helps women really step into our financial power. And I still want the name to feel tech forward. Ultimately, we're a tech company, but I want it to feel feminine as well. And so he took it back and he came back the next day to work Mad Men style and gave me this presentation. And basically he said, I've come up with a name and its roots are in currency. A lot of Arabic languages and ancient languages have used the root of this word as coin, and it still means currency today in different parts of the world. It used to be a Venetian gold currency until over time, the currency and the gold coins lost value. So people used to wear them as talismans and kept these gold coins as kind of decorative. And now today, it's used in women's clothing and is something that really gives clothing an extra sparkle, but it's, kind of associated with femininity. And I said, oh my gosh, what is this? Do I know this term? And he said, you definitely know it. It's sequin. And it was one of those moments where I just felt kind of warm and fuzzy inside. And I said, okay, that is the name of my company. I loved kind of the history behind it, the duality between deep financial services and femininity. And I just thought it was brilliant. So that's the background of the name and a little bit of fun facts and a little bit of history.
And as I was reading through it, I guess one of the big questions people probably have is Sequin a credit card or is it a debit card? How is Sequin different?
What is very unique and innovative about our product is it's actually a debit card that builds credit. Most products in the market are either debit cards or they're either credit cards, and there hasn't really been a merger of the two. And the product vision was born out of the problem that I saw when I was at Visa from talking to hundreds and hundreds of women was them saying, we find our debit card a lot more comfortable and safe because we can't get into those gotchas of credit that my mom was always really afraid of. And so we said, well, what's the problem with debit? It's not building your credit. And then my co-founder, who spent a decade at PayPal, and I put our heads together and we said, could we actually merge the two products? And we realized that, through my deep background in credit and through his deep background at PayPal, we were able to do that. And so it's kind of a first of its kind product that is blending the best of two worlds where it is building your credit, but you kind of have that safety and security of debit.
Tell me how that works on the back end, right? So I understand as the utilizer, you're going to be using your card like you would use a debit card. How on the back end does it cause that credit report to improve?
This sounds very simple, but technically it's very complex, which is kind of the sweet spot where you want to be. So essentially, the way our product works is as a user, you sign up for a Sequin card and you connect your existing bank account so you don't need to switch banks. And think of Sequin as a credit building layer on top of your checking account. And so we'll issue you a Sequin card, they're coral, and you'll get your product and you could start using it normally like you would use a debit card. And then on the back end, what we do is partner with a third party and we report your purchases to that third party who reports to all three major credit bureaus. And as I mentioned, we don't report the credit utilization factor, which is something, again, that's biasing against women. So we remove that altogether.
So in a sense, is it like you are lending the customer money and such that they're paying it back and it looks almost traditional credit card, but not necessarily for them and the risks?
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. So when you sign up for Sequin, you are signing up for a line of credit. And that line of credit becomes available on your Sequin card. And then weekly, you can, whatever you spend, you'll pay back from your connected bank account. And that's all seamless. And then we report those payments to the credit bureaus through our partner.
We're talking to Vrinda Gupta. She is the co-founder and CEO at Sequin, a first-of-its-kind debit card that builds credit for women. We're going to take a short break. I'm Doc G, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast. All around the world, tech companies are innovating and driving returns for investors. Our crowd analyzes companies across the global private market, selecting those with the greatest growth potential, then brings them to you. From personalized medicine to the $110 billion moving industry, our crowd is identifying innovators so you can invest when growth potential is greatest, early. Our crowd is the fastest growing venture capital investment community, and many of our crowd's members have benefited from over 40 IPOs or sale exits of portfolio companies. Now you can invest in Shift, who combines AI and fintech to automate the moving experience. Shift has helped over 200,000 customers across 68 countries connect with verified movers and afford their move with buy now, pay later financing. Invest today at our crowd. Invest at Shift at ourcrowd.com/EAI. You can join our crowd for free at ourcrowd.com/EAI. Join the fastest growing venture capital investment community at ourcrowd.com/EAI. Let me reintroduce you. We are talking to Vrinda Gupta. She is the CEO and co-founder of Sequin, a first-of-its-kind debit card that builds credit for women. Her women-led team of Visa and PayPal experts just announced a $5.7 million seed financing round. Vrinda, we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to get deeper into Sequin rewards. So we said the traditional rewards tend not to necessarily be female-oriented. What type of rewards does Sequin have, and how does that help with the pink tax specifically?
Absolutely. So we are so excited about our rewards program because it's different from any product out there. Essentially, so we have 3 categories of rewards on Sequin. The first one is 1% cash back on every single dollar you spend. So we make sure that anytime you're spending on Sequin, you're actually pocketing some of the pink tax. The second piece is a cash credit that you get onto Sequin anytime you spend on a category that is pink taxed. And that definition is very broad because unfortunately, many categories are pink taxed. So household goods, retail, beauty services, we have a whole list of categories that women traditionally are paying more for than men. And then the third piece is we have discounts and workshops with women-founded companies. And those companies range from mental health services to personal branding services, coding workshops, plant delivery. We just did one this month on investing, and we did another one on climate care and how exactly to reduce your climate footprint in a really kind of intentional and seamless way. And all these companies are led by women. So it's a great way to kind of support other women-founded companies. In addition to those kind of cash rewards that you get, we also have Sequin experiences. And so some of those are what we call credit power hours, which are community-based and expert-led credit events. And we bring together our community and we talk about different topics essentially to level that knowledge and information gap and even kind of exceed what the knowledge is out there. And so we talk about different topics like, how exactly does the credit system work? How do you think about calculating rewards on traditional credit cards? How do you think about credit when you join a partnership? How do you think about combining your finances? What do you need to know when you go to buy a car, get a house? And so there are all of these great topics. And it's also a wonderful community where women can come together in a safe space and talk about credit with one another. And we also have kind of credit sessions in case you just want some one-on-one help with any challenges that you're facing. So we have all of that as well. And it is this great mix of, yes, we have rewards on every dollar, but we also, help you a lot with your credit and help you feel like you're a part of a community of women who are just really excited to step into their financial power.
When you first thought of Sequin, obviously one of your main concerns was that female consumer. Is Sequin oriented for female-led businesses too? Do you see it having a role in the business world today?
The thing that we say at Sequin is we are, for the first time, centering women in financial services as the industry just wasn't built with women in mind. That being said, one of my favorite quotes is, when you build a product that centers around women, you build a better product for everyone. And unfortunately, the opposite isn't true. And what I'm seeing with Sequin is a bunch of persons who do not identify as women, so men, et cetera, are messaging me and they're saying, this is so cool. I would love to sign up for Sequin. Can I? And I said, yes, that is the purpose of what we're doing, is to make everything more inclusive. And so there's definitely a role, of course, just being women led. Of course, our mission is very women driven. We want to elevate other women on our platform as well. But in addition to that, also being very inclusive and just making sure that anyone who finds our product useful can use it as well.
It's an important point, because although the theory behind creating Sequin was to help women with their credit woes, et cetera, men probably would find it just as beneficial, if not more, than some of the traditional credit cards out there. And certainly a man struggling with credit score issues could definitely use Sequin to help them.
Absolutely. I mean, the product itself is really a first of its kind product. So, we started off with the problem that women were struggling with building credit and leveling that playing field. But ultimately what we came to is, I think, a better product for everyone.
Let's pivot to some of the stylistic decisions. Does the card really have a double mirror on it?
We want to build the mirror out in the future, but our card today is coral, which we love. And we actually, a tenet of how we do product development at Sequin is actually co-creation. And, my vision with Sequin was never that I kind of put out my personal preferences out there and I build something. It's very much talking to our users every single day and having them feel a part of this development process of revolutionizing finances for women. And so we came to coral after looking at a bunch of different colors with our community. And the women loved coral because they said it's a color that looks good on every skin tone. And we were talking about makeup and they said part of what's great about Sequin is how we preach inclusivity. And so we want, this card to look good on everyone. In the future, I think it would be so much fun to be able to co-create different designs as well. But today we have this awesome coral card, which we really love.
So far, we've been talking about your business venture, Sequin, and I think that's part of your story. But the other part of your story is growing up as a first-generation immigrant woman of color in a predominantly male world of financial startups. Tell me about your experiences. Has it been strange being different than most of the people you're coming up with as a founder of a new business?
I mean, is it strange? Yes. I think it's strange because women are such a huge opportunity to serve. This, I saw a lot of stats out there, and they're saying that serving women in financial services is actually the single largest opportunity in financial services today. And that's from McKinsey, and that's from Oliver Wyman. So it's from reputable sources. And of course, I know that intellectually, but it is interesting where, we just went through Y Combinator, which is an amazing startup accelerator. And, most of my fellow founders do kind of identify as men and, they're so supportive, but ultimately I look around and I look different, right? Not only being a woman, but being a woman of color and being a first generation immigrant. And, there are definitely days where that is intimidating, right? But I think there are most days where I wake up and that's what makes me feel like is my superpower, that I do look different and I have this differentiated set of life experiences, which a lot of people identify with. And I can extend the empathy to them and be able to put that into our product. And I think it's allowed me to look at financial services in an entirely different way and question the status quo, because really the products that I was building weren't serving me. And so I was able to look at them and say, okay, could there be a product that aligns more with my values? Could there be a product that aligns more with my life experiences? And turns out, there's a lot of women like me and a lot of opportunity in that space just from a business perspective as well. So I guess to answer your question, it's strange. There are a lot of days where I put on a braver face than maybe I'm feeling on the inside when, everyone's looking different than I am. But again, I just hone in on, I hope to be a voice for a lot of populations that have been marginalized and that really, are deserving of getting credit and are deserving of being included in the system. So that's kind of how I think about this every day.
Do you ever feel like you're being excluded from conversations because of your gender or because of your ethnic background?
I get a lot of, are you the CEO? Are you the founder? I think, those types of questions, I don't hear my male counterparts getting as much. I think a piece that I lean very heavily into is A, data, and B, my expertise and my background. And I think, being a first generation immigrant, your values are humility. I think that's one of the pieces that I've always grown up with. It's something I've always respected. And especially in this world where it is very male dominated, being able to obviously still be humble, but just grounding in facts and saying, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I built credit products for 6 years at the industry leading company. I wrote the rules and I'm well researched on the data of why this is a problem and why products like we're building at Sequin should exist. So I think, leaning into data and facts, those are a bit harder to argue with. So yeah, I'm not sure. I try not to spend too many calories thinking about that, right? And I just kind of step into, this is the mission, this is what needs to exist in the world. But the reality, the stats exist and I see them as well. So it's always, I guess both things can be true is, just making sure that you are in that room and you are coming off confident, even the times where it is a little scarier.
I'm thinking of the power of women entrepreneurs creating products for women. We talked about the story of your mom and the fear of her credit. How has it been for her to watch you build these products and start this business?
On those days where I don't feel confident, I call my mom and I just say, Mom, I don't know about today. And she just hypes me up. And she says, because of what you've built at Sequin, I feel confident in my finances. And I feel she applied for her first credit card in her own name. And she's been the one calling the bank and talking to them. And that is just the best feeling in the whole world, is my mom feeling empowered, because that is, really where all of this started. And now I have the pleasure of talking with hundreds of women every day who say, because of Sequin, I was able to leave a bad relationship that I was in because I was worried about my finances. And there's young women who are saying, I feel so much more empowered, on my career trajectory now because I have access to this information. But yeah, my mom is my biggest inspiration and is my biggest hype woman every day. So, she's as excited, if not, more than me whenever anything happens.
Thinking of you and your mom together makes me wonder how different generationally these groups of women are. Do you think, for instance, Millennial and Gen Z women have different concerns than maybe your mom's generation did?
I think the key difference is the rates at which young women are entering the workforce, which is more than ever. And our spending power is more than ever. And so I think a big concern for Millennial, Gen Z young women, young professional women, is how do I make sure that I'm protecting myself and that I am getting access to another person who has the same spending power and the same trajectory as I do? And so one of the really interesting and heartening pieces of talking to young women around Sequin is they're very eager to learn. And it's not enough to just give them a product and say, trust this is going to build your credit safely, which is the truth. But also they want to know why that's happening. They want to know what goes into credit scoring. They want to know what the biases are in the system. So they're very eager for knowledge as well. And that's something that I think is really unique. And I think is something that has been core to our product, is not only having a product that, accomplishes what they're trying to do, which is build credit, pay back the pink tax, but also allows them to feel empowered with knowledge as well. And they know that that's credible knowledge and it's not this kind of secondhand, learned this from my dad's friend knowledge. I don't know if this is true or it's not true. So I think that safety and credible knowledge coming from women credit experts is something that's really powerful as well.
You're not building Sequin in a vacuum. Things are happening in the world. We just obviously went through and are going through a pandemic. We've all been surprised by this great resignation. A lot of people have been leaving the workforce, including a lot of women. How do you think that's affected your work at Sequin? Has it changed the way you thought about your product?
The original concept for Sequin was born pre-pandemic. And the idea was, we're going to make a premium credit card that has rewards that are more focused around where women are spending versus where men are spending, which is not too dissimilar from our rewards program today. But the challenge that I saw during the pandemic was twofold. The first was I would talk to women and they would say, I'm really interested in this credit product, but actually, how does credit work? I'm not sure if I'm building credit properly. And so I realized that there was a huge need to actually help women enter the system and not just say, okay, here's another credit product, because maybe I would have to reject them from Sequin, or maybe I would have to give them a lower credit line. And that is exactly what we're fighting against. So that was the first piece, was just understanding that credit in and of itself became a lot more top of mind than it was pre-pandemic. And then the second piece was, because of this great resignation and women leaving the workforce, but also requiring help with their businesses, we're seeing that women were A, more reliant on credit, and B, we're struggling to get PPP and business loans as well, which is very directly related to credit, because many times, especially if you're a smaller business, the underwriters will look at you as a person for your credit versus your business. And so these women were personally struggling with their credit, and then that was affecting their ability to run their businesses as well. And so I guess this is all to say, during the pandemic, I realized that there is a huge problem with just the credit building aspect of it. And that's where we needed to start if we were to really address the problem. And so, after we were into the pandemic, we started thinking a lot about, how do we go from a traditional credit product, which may exasperate a lot of the problems that are out there, to a product that's actually nurturing and guiding women into the system, building credit in kind of a way that doesn't have all those gotchas in the system, and, helps you understand how exactly to thrive once you're actually within the system and building credit in your own name.
Vrinda, let's talk a little bit about your trajectory as a founder. After you had this episode with the Chase Sapphire card, you left your job and you went to the Berkeley Haas School of Business to get an MBA. Tell me about that decision to go get an MBA. I mean, you don't necessarily need an MBA to be a founder. Why did you take that step?
All of the dots are clear when you look back, right? But I think if I were to be in my head, where my head was at that point, I knew there was a huge opportunity to do something better for women and financial services. And I didn't quite understand what my options were, because most of my career had been spent in one place, which was Visa. And so business school to me was a great way to explore what the options were. And I think at that point, I thought, maybe if I got my MBA and I was the head of innovation at a big bank, I could solve this problem. And I got offers at those big banks, and I realized that the problem of women in financial services was a lot more systemic, and I wasn't going to be able to solve it within the existing system. And so being in business school actually allowed me to ultimately find my MBA summer internship, which was at IDEO. And it's a group of creative folk that are questioning the status quo. And so when I was there, I was able to, talk about this idea a little bit more. Also, the timing was good, where Time's Up was happening, Me Too was happening. And so I started developing more and more conviction that women could make an impact with our dollar and actually are searching for products and services that are aligned with our values. And so when I was doing my MBA summer internship, I said all of this very quickly to women in a restroom as we're washing hands. And I add the restroom bit because this is why it's important to have women in leadership, where, I think this happens to men all the time. We're on the golf course, you're in the restaurant, your places, and you're pitching your startup idea and they say, oh, I'll give you funding. So there is this woman who was on the investment team at IDEO. And she said, I didn't know that at the time, but she said, I love this idea. We can give you a bit of startup capital. Do you think this is, something you would want to pursue seriously? Because I think this is a huge opportunity. And that was the first time where I felt, maybe I could be an entrepreneur and maybe I could go after this and seriously, make this my life. And so, again, as I mentioned, the dots connecting backwards, it was, I got to leave Visa, I got to go to business school and, have all this optionality. Then I was at this MBA summer internship and that led to everything. But I think I was really just in search of some truth around what is the challenge in the system? Can I fix it from within the system or do I have to do something completely differently? And spoiler alert, it required a complete overhaul in how we're looking at finances today.
It's an interesting point because clearly you have a mind towards social activism, but it begs the question, how do we become social activists? Can you do that within the framework of big business as it stands, or do you need to be a co-founder? From your story, it sounds like for you, being a founder itself gave you more room to practice that social activism.
Absolutely. I mean, I think had there been a company like Sequin, maybe I would have put my hat in the ring to work at that company, right? But there wasn't really anything like it. And it was kind of this perfect intersection between my deep expertise in credit and fintech, but also, this very real human experience that I had as, as we talked about, as a woman, as an immigrant, as, a person of color. And so I was able to kind of bring those together and say, I can actually do something about this. But I did become very obsessed with this idea of the social enterprise. And it was actually one of the reasons I was interested in going to business school was maybe finding social enterprise type companies. And I loved this idea that you could do good by doing well. And I felt there was a lot of opportunity to do that. And then when I realized, okay, well, the realm that I want to do that in is going to require someone to care a lot and dedicate their life to this. And I haven't found that someone that I could kind of tag to. So I think this requires me going out on a limb and maybe I am that someone. That's kind of how I thought about it all coming together.
You mentioned fintech. We really haven't talked much about that today. How has that played a role in your journey at Sequin?
I count my lucky stars every day for my background and my experience at Visa and some of the incredible mentors that I had when I was there. I had a very unique opportunity when I was at Visa where I was one of the few new graduates at that time to really join the credit cards team. And I very quickly had taken on a lot of responsibility where I owned the Visa rules nationwide. So I wrote those rules and I was also in charge of enforcing them as well. So any new Visa card that was launched from my tenure at Visa was, I had my hands in and I understood how these products worked. And I was, comfortable talking to regulators. I was comfortable talking to executives of big banks at a very, very young age. And I feel very grateful for that experience. So today, as my co-founder and I are building Sequin, I feel our expertise has helped us create this unique type of product that is this debit card that builds credit. Because many times, we'll be talking to our partners, we'll be talking to our regulators, and they're saying, the Visa rules or the network, the industry rules are not, built to allow for this. And it's a pretty incredible feeling to be able to say, actually, I wrote those rules and the intention behind that rule is actually not how you're interpreting it. And this is why. And so having that background and being able to understand what the intention was behind how products are being built and then being able to, I guess, understand the rules and then know how to break them a little bit is another piece that has been, very challenging, but also really fun and creating something brand new.
There are many people listening right now who look forward to the idea of being a founder. You've now walked this path. Tell us about some of the big mistakes you've made that maybe you'd warn other people about making.
I would say if I were to go back to myself when I first became a founder, the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself is to trust myself. I think I spent a lot of time early on being a founder trusting other people more than I trusted myself. And consistently, the best intentions are out there, but there's a lot of bad advice out there as well. And I think, many times I would say, well, this person has founded multiple companies. This person's a venture capitalist. They must have all the answers. When in reality, you as the founder are the person who understands your problem and understands your users. And so you're going to be the person who's best positioned to make decisions. And so trusting yourself, trusting your gut. And I think the other piece is just, I feel I was always looking for this magical person that, there's going to be this person. If I just get access to this person, I'll be able to find all the answers that I need. And I think that realization that magical person is me and now my co-founder is really empowering. And knowing that you have everything you need, and the things that you don't have, talk to your users and they'll tell you those answers. So betting on yourself, trusting your gut, and just realizing that you and the people who you're building for are going to be the ones building your product is really, really powerful. I think the second piece I would say is there are a lot of distractions in this world. There's a lot of noise. And I think there's, this concept in life where it's like Instagram versus reality, right? What are you portraying versus what's going on in the background? And I think as a founder, I call it tech crunch versus reality. You see all these big funding rounds and you see, well, this entrepreneur did that. And so maybe that's a great opportunity area to go after. And there's just so much you don't know that's going on behind the scenes. And so again, just ignoring that, I don't even read those publications because I don't want to get distracted. But early on in my founding journey, I would, be reading Twitter, be reading all of these publications all the time and comparing myself and comparing my company and my mission to them. And, realizing that, again, talking to your users and building your product is the most important thing, and doing very little outside of that is kind of the recipe of making progress in your startup.
Well, Vrinda, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. Normally, when we think about business building, we think about founders, we often either think about someone who wants to just make a lot of money or is really passionate about an idea specifically. What's refreshing about your story is I think you started with social activism and this idea of inequity and then built a business around that. It really speaks to this idea that you can do well while doing good, which is something you said earlier in the interview. And it just goes to show that we have different reasons for building the businesses we build. And it's been exciting to listen to your story about Sequin and why you've built this business of credit that will help women with their credit scores, as well as some of the inequities of our financial system. I want to end this episode the way I end every episode by asking you what is up next in your life, and if people want to learn more, how they can reach you. So first and foremost, what is up next in your life and with Sequin?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're so excited about 2022. We are launching the rewards program that we talked about in addition to our credit building functionality. So we actually have a wait list that we're going to be letting people off of shortly. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to www.sequincard.com. There's more information there. You can put your name in the sign up. We'll add you to the wait list, and then we'll make sure that you're the first to know when we are launched.
And if people have questions for you specifically, where can they find you on socials?
Yeah. So my personal Twitter is Vrinda_tweet. So that's a great way. My DMs are open. And yeah, I think that's probably the best way to reach me.
This has been the Earn and Invest podcast. On behalf of myself, Jordan Grummett, aka Doc G, I wanted to thank Vrinda Gupta. That's a wrap. Hey, everybody. Just a little update on our ground team. The ground team is a chance for you, an Earn and Invest listener, to become part of my team for my book launch of Taking Stock. That's going to be during the first week of August. We already have almost 100 participants. If you sign up to be part of the ground team, you are going to get extra video. You're going to get snapshots into the book early, and you're going to get other content and blogs. Become part of this community. Help me get this book out. Again, we're starting early because the ground team needs to be in place by early August. I hope you check it out. Just go to earnandinvest.com, and right up at the top of the page, there'll be a place for you to learn more about the ground team. Come become part of the Earn and Invest and Taking Stock team. Thanks for listening. Cool.
Have fun. Gosh, Doc, your questions are really, really thoughtful. I've done a few of these, and I think each of them kind of focuses on just one aspect of the journey, right? Either my background or what it's like to be a founder or the product or the tech behind it. And I think you clearly had done your research and did a wonderful job just kind of blending all those together. So I thank you. I love when the story is holistic and it is more like you can see the moving parts come together versus them in a silo. So thank you for all of your research.
Oh, no problem. I really, so there are a few things, and I've said this kind of before on this podcast. If I'm going to interview you, I need to do my homework because I obviously want to ask you the questions that are going to bring out your story. But I also kind of have that more holistic view when I have someone on. I really kind of want to get to the bottom of what makes them unique and interesting. And so talking about the product, talking about Sequin is really cool and interesting, but kind of delving deeper and finding out why are you the person right now who came up with this and how it has this process affected your life, I think just makes for a really nice arc to a conversation. And this is, it's earn and invest. So it's more of a holistic story as opposed to this is how you get a good credit score or this is how you put money in your 401k, or et cetera. So it's important to me to kind of tell a person's story because I think that's where the excitement and the interest really lies is pulling it all together into something that makes sense. So like when I look at your story, I say, this kind of makes sense because I understand a little bit about her childhood. I understand a little bit about, her mother's fears. I understand a little bit about Sequin and what it does. And I understand about Vrinda as a business person, right? As a founder, which is something that we all have interest in because it's kind of that cult of personality. What makes you a founder? What makes you successful when people fail all the time at doing things? So to me, that stuff is really interesting. Tell me, is there anything we didn't talk about in the episode that you wished to speak about? Because this is right now the after show, and I usually include bits of this or all of this on kind of the back end. So is there anything that you'd want to talk about that we didn't?
I'm trying to think. Honestly, I think you asked all of the right questions, and I think I was able to say everything I wanted to say. So I don't think so. It was just so much fun. I had a good time.
Yeah. And I always say also that that's my goal. Like, I feel like the best episodes are when people walk away from it saying, oh, that was really fun. Like because usually if you're comfortable, that means like it just comes out better and the story comes out better. And it's just, a good recording in general.